So I have been tasked today with giving a brief overview of the market of Barbados. Today, one of the things I'm going to do, in addition to presenting the market of Barbados, is just to give a background and some fundamentals of services, not just from everybody's personal experience, but also from like an international perspective. What are the international standards or fragmentations or understanding of services? So I'm just going to spend a few minutes just doing that, just to share that knowledge with you. So do bear with me. I will get to these statistics soon. I can see many excited faces in the crowd today. Um, so fundamentals of trade and services. What is a service? Trying to find a definition for a service, which is obviously an intangible product, has been academics have been tasked with this activity for quite some time. As you know, services became a part of the WTO mandate very recently when it became the WTO in moving from GATT to the WTO. So here are just a few definitions of a service. As service providers, you may have your own understanding of what your business is, but I think you may find a little reflection of your business in some of the definitions that I have here. So you see Peter Pariag, who's actually an academic. He said it's a range of intangible products and activities. He made it very vague, whereas if you look at the system of national accounts, which is a system that measures international service transactions, so they collect a database and statistics for services on a yearly basis. The 2008 version decided as the results of production activity that changes the condition of consuming units. The last definition, which also relates to my colleague Kristen's explanation, this came from the Export Development Forum. Sherry Stevenson described it as enablers of the international global value chain. I forgot to go up there. But what is a service? I think this is something that we're going to be struggling with in the field of academia for quite some time into the future, because services is getting more and more complex. Aside from having the conventional ICT, energy, and those things, you have a range of services that is a mix. You have people that are in the ICT and energy service sector. How do we account for those people? As economists, you want to find a statistic that will allow you to measure that transaction, because in your business, you want to know how your business is performing internationally before you make that important decision to pick a market and begin exporting. So without a proper database, as we continue to struggle with right now, it'll be very hard for you to track the international services environment to make those critical decisions which may make or break certain businesses. So having spoken about the WTO describes services as anything that is not executed by a government authority. So any commercial activity that is not executed by a government authority is considered to be a service. They describe services as being four modes. So that's four modes of supply. The first one is cross-border trade. So this is when the service supplier and the consumer remain in their home countries. So this is, say for example, you have a service that you want to provide. Your consumer is, say for example, Barbados. You would be doing a cross-border trade if you provide your service from Trinidad to Barbados. The next mode is consumption abroad. This is when the consumer leaves their home country and comes to you wherever you are located to consume your service. So say for example, you have a tax business. If we have someone from Jamaica that comes to Trinidad to have their taxes filled out as a corporation, that is considered consumption abroad because they are consuming your service in Trinidad and Tobago, which is not their home country. Mode number 3 is commercial presence. I think this is where most persons elevate to, which is having an established business in the country that you want to operate. So this is considered commercial presence. And the final one is movement of natural persons, which is when you as a service provider go to the country and you provide the service there. But the movement of natural persons is not just limited to catching a plane. Usually there are a lot more rules that govern how you can move, what are the standards you have to adhere to before you can enter the market to provide this service. The movement of natural persons is actually one of the most complicated services in WTO negotiations, because a lot of countries have created a lot of barriers to trade, making standards that none of us knew existed for persons who do law. So for example, in Trinidad, we have the JD system for lawyers, whereas in the States, you have the pre-law and you have the law program. In order to practice law in the States, you have to do a one-year program of sitting in the US, and you have to write an exam. So you can't, as a lawyer, just go to the States and practice law. It's the same for accountants, it's the same for persons providing energy services, and as we're realizing now in the study of services, more and more barriers are being created to protect domestic service providers to make sure that in everything that happens, the local service providers in the home country have first choice and are always selected first to be used. So this is something, as a service provider, I think Aisha will allude to it later today, some of the barriers to entry that aren't necessarily written in stone, some things that are conventional norms, some standards that you don't hear about until you get there and you find out you can't conduct your business. These are important things to know. It's very difficult to find this information, and I would advise all persons here to utilize our services department before entering a market to find out what some of these barriers are, to ensure that when you go there, you pack up your family and you move over there, you find out that you can't do what you were tasked to do because you didn't have a piece of paper or because you didn't meet a residency requirement. So as I said, I would invite you all to continue to use our services department to find this information out before you embark on any journeys. This was what I was mostly tasked to do, which was to give a market overview of the Barbadian market. Barbados, despite the population of 283,000, is one of the largest Caribbean islands in the English-speaking Caribbean. That means that more so than some of these smaller islands, your market is larger. That is significantly smaller than Trinidad and Tobago, but that's just the reality of the numbers that we're working with in the CARICOM region. As you can see, their GDP growth has been less than 1%, with exception from 2009, where they had negative growth as a result of the global economic crisis. Barbados has been demonstrating for quite some time less than 1% growth on an annual basis. So that tells a few tales about the economy of Barbados. Their main economic sectors are tourism, international business, and foreign direct investment. One of the things I want all persons in the room here to note is that Barbados' economy is mostly carried by sectors that depend on persons' disposable incomes. That means Barbados does as well as persons in foreign countries' pockets are doing. That is something that will affect your business, because if persons in the States aren't doing well, they will not have, international business. If the UK isn't doing well, they will not have as many tourists. As one of my colleagues here said at the table, one of the good things for the tourism market is, for Barbados specifically, is that the echelon of persons that visit their market are more than likely unaffected by the economic realities, and those are the top 1% of our economy. But tourism is such a fragile economy. You never know if somebody may have something tomorrow that is better than yours. And to have a whole economy based on such a fragile economy is very difficult as an exporter to plan your affairs when tomorrow something could happen in the market and all of a sudden all of the opportunities that you had foreseen have gone through the window. So these sectors are things I really want persons to pay attention to when making decisions into going in the market. Many of you may not actually be economists, but that's what the EMRC department is for, in that we provide economic analysis for you, free economic analysis, which is even better, for you on things that you may not necessarily be versed on, to make sure that you make an educated decision when you are deciding to export to a market. Okay, just a brief policy update. As many of you may be hearing, Barbados has been going through a few austerity measures. They have titled it the 19-month program, recovery program, which began in September of 2013. It is a government program that is expected to curtail some of the negatives of the Bajan economy. It has resulted in an ending of university funding for local Barbadians to the local university, a retrenchment of 3,000 public workers, as many of us would have heard, and an ending of transportation subsidy. For many of you who would have been to Barbados, you would have known you would have been able to travel for $2 Bajan to anywhere in the country. As of recently, that has since ended, and you have to pay the market price to be able to travel. So you can no longer go from Bridgetown to St. Lucie for $2. You have to pay the market value for what that trip may cost. Transportation-wise, as a service provider, where you have to be very mobile, you will have to account for such a change. Your every move will cost more than it would have before when it was subsidized. And I have been hearing in the works there is some intent to reduce any fuel subsidies as well. So that means the cost of fuel is intending to increase. So these are some things that you need to pay attention to. In terms of offsetting these negatives, the Barbadian government has intended to go on a very strong infrastructural investment program during these 19 months. As many of you may have heard, Barbados is going to be the first host of the Top Gear International Festival. That required them to do some remodeling to the Bushy Park. That is supposed to be held very soon. It's all over the radios. They finished that infrastructural development. Currently, they're focusing on a new beach resort, a new cruise terminal, a waste-to-energy facility, 750 lower to middle-class housing, and a road rehabilitation program. I cannot speak directly to the impact of these things on the economy because it has not begun yet, but they are hoping that these negatives that we see up here will be offset by the infrastructural investment program that they intend to embark on and would have begun, as I stated earlier. Okay, sorry about that. In terms of the Barbados employment situation, in 2013, this is the third quarter of 2013, the majority of Barbados' population was employed in the wholesale and retail trade business. After that, it was accommodation and food and services. These two sectors, for the most part, are subsumed under the services sector. As you know, Barbados has a lot of duty-free shopping, not just in Bridgetown, but off-site. You can go duty-free shopping almost anywhere in the island once they have a shop and it's named duty-free. And once you have a ticket that is 6 months valid, you can go shopping in any of these duty-free places. And they really bank on tourists taking advantage of these breaks going forward. So this is something to note. Another final something which is important to note, I don't know if you remember me stating earlier that services as an integral input into the global value chain. So as Kristen said, for every good that is produced, a number of services would have been inputted into that end product to make it come to reality. That means that your product, your service product, is impacted by the retail price of the end good that you would have contributed to making. As you can see the prices here, the retail prices for Barbados has been going up. The index of retail prices, is an index that measures the changes of retail prices as of July 2001. It measures the fluctuation in the prices that goods and services are retailed for. These are important goods and services, so transportation, food, clothing, housing, heating, and those other important things that economists would have decided is integral for the everyday existence of a human. As I just stated, the transportation subsidy has since gone, so we're going to see, I believe, an increase in the index of retail prices because that means goods are going to be more expensive because to transport goods from the supermarket, from the wholesaler to the supermarket now is not going to be as cheap as it was before. So I do expect to see an increase in the index of retail prices later on in 2014. I would encourage everyone to pay attention to the trend for retail prices going forward because if your end product is becoming more expensive to the average Barbadian, it would mean that you would have to do some revisions to the cost of your services. While that may not be much of a problem for most of you, I think that actually would benefit most of you. It also says something about the pocket of Barbadians. So if you're into the construction business, building homes for average persons, they may not have as much money to spend on your services, architecture, taxes, and those things. So these are just some important facts to note going forward. This is the end of my presentation. Next, I will be presenting on the Jamaican market. So just look forward to that, and I hope you really take note of some of the critical factors that I have spoken about in the Barbadian market. Thank you.